Hi there, my name is Mr. Pete, and I am a fourth grade teacher. I'm currently reading Louis Sachar's Holes, one of the greatest children's books ever written, and that is not hyperbole. We are about to start chapter 5, and we are just learning about our character Stanley Yelnats, who is at Camp Green Lake, and Camp Green Lake is this very strange detention center in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a desert that used to be a lake. He apparently has a curse on him placed on his great-great-grandfather, his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather that has affected Stanley Yelnats, the first, second, third, and fourth. What is going to happen? Here we go. Chapter 5. To my class, please make sure you hit setting at the top and follow this one again as we start heading towards digging holes and figuring out a little bit more about Stanley Yelnats, his family, and about what is going on. Chapter 5. There were 6 large gray tents, and each one had a black letter on it. A, B, C, D, E, or F. The first 5 tents were for the campers. The counselors slept in F. Stanley was assigned to D tent. Mr. Pendanski was his counselor. Highlight Mr. Pendanski, new character. This will be a round character for sure, just like Mr. Sir. Let's meet Mr. Pendanski. My name is easy to remember, said Mr. Pendanski as he shook hands with Stanley just outside the tent. 3 easy words. Pen, dance, key. Mr. Sir returned to the office. Mr. Pendanski was younger than Mr. Sir and not nearly as scary looking. The top of his head was shaved so close it was almost bald, but his face was covered in a thick, curly black beard. His nose was badly sunburned. Mr. Sir isn't really so bad, said Mr. Pendanski. He's just been in a bad mood ever since he quit smoking. The person you've got to worry about is the warden. There's really only one rule at Camp Green Lake. Don't upset the warden. Uh-oh. Remember, we heard about the warden in chapter 1. We've still not met the warden. Stanley nodded as if he understood. I want you to know, Stanley, that I respect you, said Mr. Pendanski. I understand you've made some bad mistakes in your life. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But everyone makes mistakes. You may have done some bad things, but that doesn't mean you're a bad kid. Stanley nodded. It seemed pointless to try and tell his counselor that he was innocent. He figured that everyone probably said that. He didn't want Mr. Pendanski to think he had a bad attitude. I'm going to help you turn your life around, said his counselor, but you're going to have to help too. Can I count on your help? Yes, sir, Stanley said. Mr. Pendanski said, good, and patted Stanley on the back. 2 boys, each carrying a shovel, were coming across the compound. Mr. Pendanski called to them, Rex, Allen, I want you to come say hello to Stanley. He's the newest member of our team. The boys glanced wearily at Stanley. Wearily, vocabulary word, great word for tired. They were dripping with sweat and their faces were so dirty that it took Stanley a moment to notice that one kid was white and the other black. What happened to Barf Bag? Asked the black kid. Louis is still in the hospital, said Mr. Pendanski. He won't be returning. He told the boys to come shake Stanley's hand and introduce themselves, like gentlemen. Hi, the white kid grunted. That's Allen, said Mr. Pendanski. My name's not Allen, the boy said. It's Squid, and that's X-Ray. Hey, said X-Ray. He smiled and shook Stanley's hand. He wore glasses, but they were so dirty that Stanley wondered how he could see out of them. All right, so we immediately meet 2 boys, sort of 3. Barf Bag is Louis, and Louis is who Stanley's taking the place of. He's in the hospital, and he's not coming back. Then you have Rex, whose nickname is X-Ray, and you have Allen, whose nickname is Squid. Rex is black, and Allen is white. But we're going to learn them from their nicknames. Squid is the white kid, and X-Ray is a black kid. Okay, but they're so dirty they look like they're the same color. Mr. Pendanski told Alan to go to the rec hall and bring the other boys to meet Stanley. Then he led him inside the tent. There were 7 cots, each one less than 2 feet from the one next to it. "Which was Lewis's cot?" Mr. Pendanski asked. "Barf Bag slept here," said X-Ray, kicking at one of the beds. "All right, Stanley, that'll be yours," said Mr. Pendanski. Stanley looked at the cot and nodded. He wasn't particularly thrilled about sleeping in the same cot that had been used by somebody named Barf Bag. 7 crates were stacked in 2 piles at one side of the tent. The open end of the crates faced outward. Stanley put his backpack, change of clothes, and towel in what used to be Barf Bag's crate. It was at the bottom of the stack that had 3 in it. Squid returned with 4 other boys. The first 3 were introduced by Mr. Pendanski as Jose, Theodore, and Ricky. They called themselves Magnet, Armpit, and Zigzag. So Jose is Magnet, Theodore is Armpit, and Ricky is Zigzag. "They all have nicknames," explained Mr. Pendanski. "However, I prefer to use the names their parents gave them. The names that society will recognize them by when they return to become useful and hard-working members of society." "It ain't just a nickname," X-Ray told Mr. Pendanski. He tapped the rim of his glasses. "I can see inside of you, Mom. You got a big, fat heart." The last boy either didn't have a real name or else he didn't have a nickname. Both Mr. Pendanski and X-Ray called him Zero, another character. "You know why his name's Zero?" asked Mr. Pendanski. "Because there's nothing inside his head." He smiled and playfully shook Zero's shoulder. So, the 7 boys in camp, you have X-Ray, Squid, Zigzag, you have Magnet, Armpit, Zero, and Stanley. All right, those are our 7. Who's the only boy that Mr. Pendanski sort of treats badly? Zero said nothing. "And that's Mom," a boy said. Mr. Pendanski smiled at him. "If it makes you feel better to call me Mom, Theodore, go ahead and call me Mom." He turned to Stanley. "If you have questions, Theodore will help you. You got that, Theodore? I'm depending on you." Theodore spit a thin line of saliva between his teeth, causing some of the other boys to complain about the need to keep their home sanitary. "You were all new here once," said Mr. Pendanski, "and you all know what it feels like. I'm counting on every one of you to help Stanley." Stanley looked at the ground. Mr. Pendanski left the tent, and soon the other boys began to file out as well, taking their towels and change of clothes with them. Stanley was relieved to be left alone, but he was so thirsty he felt as if he would die if he didn't get something to drink soon. Hyperbole. "Hey, Theodore," he said, going after him, "do you know where I can fill my canteen?" Theodore whirled and grabbed Stanley by his collar. "My name's not Theodore," he said. "It's Armpit." He threw Stanley to the ground. Stanley stared up at him, terrified. "There's a water spigot on the wall of the shower stall." "Thanks, Armpit," said Stanley. As he watched the boys turn and walk away, he couldn't for the life of him figure out why anyone would want to be called Armpit. In a way, it made him feel a little better about having to sleep in a cot that had been used by somebody named Barf Bag. Maybe it was a term of respect. So I guess the question here is, why are they so adamant about using their nicknames and not their real names? Tell me what you think in the comments. That's a very interesting question. And we don't know, the only person whose real name we don't know is Zero, and the only person who doesn't have a nickname is Stanley. So, fantastic. Thank you so much for reading this chapter with me. How many plot points, I wonder, could you find in this chapter? And we kind of dived into it. Now, Stanley hasn't dug a hole yet, but we have met all of our main characters in our current timeline. So our group of 7, where you have Stanley, Magnet, Armpit, Zigzag, 0, X-ray, squid. All right? So there are 7, and then you have Mr. Pendanski, who is their troop leader, and you have Mr. Sir, who seems like he is the overall kind of camp guard. All right? As we go into chapter 6, we are learning a bit more. We still don't know a whole lot. We don't know what Stanley did to get in here. We don't know about any of these boys or any of these characters. We've not yet met the warden, but we know a little bit about the warden. Doesn't seem to be a person that we should mess with, but we don't know. Right? All right. So will we get to our first hole in chapter 6? Like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you on the next page. Peace.